Chapter 16. I wonder if you've ever noticed a rather peculiar thing, viz., how differently the same news item can affect two different people. I mean, you tell something to Jones and Brown, let us say, and while Jones sits plunged in gloom and looking licked to a splinter, Brown gives 3 rousing cheers and goes into a buck and wing dance. And the same thing is true of Smith and Robinson. Often struck me as curious, that has. It was so now. Listening to the recent heated exchanges between Madeline Bassett and Gussie hadn't left me what you might call optimistic, but the heart bowed down with weight of woe to weakest hope will cling, as the fellow said, and I had tried to tell myself that their mutual love, though admittedly having taken it on the chin at the moment, might eventually get cracking again, causing all to be forgotten and forgiven. I mean to say, remorse has frequently been known to set in after a dust-up between a couple of troth-plighters, with all that sorry I was cross and can you ever forgive me stuff, and love, after being down in the cellar for a time with no takers, perks up and carries on again as good as new. Oh, blessings on the falling out that all the more endears, is the way I heard Jeeves put it once. But, at Stiffy's words, this hope collapsed as if it had been struck on the back of the head with a china basin containing beans, and I sank forward in my chair, the face buried in the hands. It is always my policy to look on the bright side, but in order to do this you have to have a bright side to look on, and under existing conditions there wasn't one. This, as Madeline Bassett would have said, was the end. I had come to this house as a raisonneur to bring the young folks together, but however much of a raisonneur you are, you can't bring young folks together if one of them elopes with somebody else. You are not merely hampered, but shackled. So now, as I say, I sank forward in my chair, the F buried in the H. To Pop Bassett, on the other hand, this bit of front-page news had plainly come as rare and refreshing fruit. My face being buried as stated, I couldn't see if he went into a buck and wing dance, but I should think it highly probable that he did a step or two, for when he spoke, you could tell from the timbre of his voice that he was feeling about as pepped up as a man can feel without bursting. One could understand his fizziness, of course. Of all the prospective sons-in-law in existence, Gussie, with the possible exception of Bertram Wooster, was the one he would have chosen last. He had viewed him with concern from the start, and if he had been living back in the days when fathers called the shots in the matter of their daughters' marriages, would have forbidden the banns without a second thought. Gussie once told me that when he, Gussie, was introduced to him, Bassett, as the fellow who was to marry his, Bassett's, offspring, he, Bassett, had stared at him with his jaw dropping, and then, in a sort of strangled voice, had said, "What?" incredulously, if you see what I mean, as if he were hoping that they were just playing a jolly practical joke on him, and that in due course the real chap would jump out from behind a chair and say, "April Fool." And when he, Bassett, at last got on to it that there was no deception, and that Gussie was really what he had drawn, he went off into a corner, and sat there motionless, refusing to speak when spoken to. Little wonder, then, that Stiffy's announcement had bucked him up, like a dose of Dr. Somebody's tonic swamp juice, which acts directly on the red corpuscles and imparts a gentle glow. "Eloped?" he gurgled. "That's right. With the cook? With none other. That's why I said there wasn't going to be any dinner. We shall have to make do with hard-boiled eggs, if there are any left over from the treat." The mention of hard-boiled eggs made Pop Bassett wince for a moment, and one could see that his thoughts had flitted back to the tea-tent, but he was far too happy to allow sad memories to trouble him for long. With a wave of the hand, he dismissed dinner as something that didn't matter one way or the other. The Bassetts, the wave suggested, could rough it if they had to. "Are you sure of your facts, my dear?" "I met them as they were starting off. Gussie said he hoped I wouldn't mind him borrowing my car." "You reassured him, I trust?" "Oh, yes," I said. "That's all right, Gussie, help yourself." Good girl, an excellent response. Then they've really gone?" "With the wind."
"And they plan to get married?"
"As soon as Gussie can get a special licence. You have to apply to the Archbishop of Canterbury, and I'm told he stings you for quite a bit."
"Money well spent."
"That's how Gussie feels. He told me he was dropping the cook at Bertie's aunt's place, and then going on to London to confer with the Archbish. He's full of zeal." This extraordinary statement that Gussie was landing Emerald Stoker on Aunt Dahlia brought my head up with a jerk. I found myself speculating on how the old flesh and blood was going to take the intrusion, and it gave me rather an awed feeling to think how deep Gussie's love for his M must be, to make him face such fearful risks. The aged relative has a strong personality, and finds no difficulty, when displeased, in reducing the object of her displeasure to a spot of grease in a matter of minutes. I am told that sportsmen, whom in her hunting days she had occasion to rebuke for riding over hounds, were never the same again, and for months would go about in a sort of stupor, starting at sudden noises. My head being now up, I was able to see Pop Bassett, and I found that he was regarding me with an eye so benevolent that I could hardly believe that this was the same ex-magistrate with whom I had so recently been hobnobbing, if you can call it hobnobbing when a couple of fellows sit in a couple of chairs for 20 minutes without saying a word to each other. It was plain that joy had made him the friend of all the world, even to the extent of allowing him to look at Bertram without a shudder. He was more like something out of Dickens than anything human.
"Your glass is empty, Mr. Worcester," he cried buoyantly. "May I refill it?"
I said he might. I had had two, which is generally my limit, but with my aplomb shattered as it was, I felt that a third wouldn't hurt. Indeed, I would have been willing to go even more deeply into the thing. I once read about a man who used to drink 26 martinis before dinner, and the conviction was beginning to steal over me that he had had the right idea.
"Roderick tells me," he proceeded,
as sunny as if a crack of his had been greeted with laughter in court,
"that the reason you were unable to be with us at the school treat this afternoon was that urgent family business called you to Brinkley Court. I trust everything turned out satisfactorily."
"Oh, yes, thanks.
"We all missed you, but business before pleasure, of course. How was your uncle? You found him well, I hope?"
"Yes, he was fine."
"And your aunt?"
"She'd gone to London."
"Indeed. You must have been sorry not to have seen her. I know few women I admire more. So hospitable, so breezy. I've seldom enjoyed anything more than my recent visit to her house."
I think his exuberance would have led him to continue in the same strain indefinitely, but at this point Stiffy came out of the thoughtful silence into which she had fallen. She had been standing there regarding him with a speculative eye, as if debating within herself whether or not to start something, and now she gave the impression that her mind was made up. "I'm glad to see you so cheerful, Uncle Watkin. I was afraid my news might have upset you."
"Upset me?" said Pop Bassett incredulously. "Whatever put that idea in your head?"
"Well, your short one son-in-law."
"It is precisely that has made this the happiest day of my life."
"Then you can make it the happiest of mine," said Stiffy, striking while the iron was H, "by giving Harold that vicarage." Most of my attention, as you may well imagine, being concentrated on contemplating the soup in which I was immersed, I cannot say whether or not Pop Bassett hesitated, but if he did, it was only for an instant. No doubt for a second or two the vision of that hard-boiled egg rose before him, and he was conscious again of the resentment he'd been feeling at Stinker's failure to keep a firm hand on the junior members of his flock. But the thought that Augustus Finknottle was not to be his son-in-law drove the young cleric's shortcomings from his mind. Filled with the milk of human kindness so nearly to the brim that you could almost hear it sloshing about inside him, he was in no shape to deny anyone anything. I really believe that if at this point in the proceedings I had tried to touch him for a fiver, he would have parted without a cry.
"Of course, of course, of course, of course,"
he said, carolling like one of Jeeves's larks on the wing.
"I am sure that Pinker will make an excellent vicar."
"The best," said Stiffy. "He's wasted as a curate. No scope running under wraps. Unleash him as a vicar, and he'll be the talk of the established church. He's as hot as a pistol."
"I have always had the highest opinion of Harold Pinker."
"I'm not surprised. All the nibs feel the same. They know he's got what it takes. Very sound on doctrine, and can preach like a streak."
"Yes, I enjoy his sermons. Manly and straightforward."
"That's because he's one of these healthy outdoor open-air men. Muscular Christianity, that's his dish. He used to play football for England."
"Indeed?"
"He was what's called a prop forward."
"Really?"
At the words prop forward, I had, of course, started visibly. I hadn't known that that's what Stinker was, and I was thinking how ironical life could be. I mean to say, There was Plank searching high and low for a forward of this nature, saying to himself that he would pretty soon have to give up the hopeless quest, and here was I in a position to fill the bill for him, but owing to the strained condition of our relations, unable to put him on to this good thing. Very sad I felt, and the thought occurred to me, as it had often done before, that one ought to be kind even to the very humblest, because you never know when they may not come in useful. "Then may I tell Harold that the balloon's going up?" said Stiffy.
I beg your pardon?
"I mean, it's official about this vicarage."
Certainly, certainly, certainly.
"Oh, Uncle Watkin, how can I thank you?"
Quite all right, my dear,
said Pop Bassett, more Dickensie than ever.
And now,
he went on, parting from his moorings and making for the door,
you will excuse me, Stephanie, and you, Mr. Wooster. I must go to Madeline and...
Congratulate her?
I was about to say, dry her tears.
If any.
You think she will not be in a state of dejection?
Would any girl be who's been saved by a miracle from having to marry Gussie Finknottle?
True, very true,
said Pop Bassett, and he was out of the room like one of those wing three-quarters, who, even if they can't learn to give the reverse pass, are fast. If there had been any uncertainty as to whether Sir Watkin Bassett had done a buck and wing dance, there was none about Stiffy doing one now. She pirouetted freely, and the dullest eye could discern that it was only the fact that she hadn't one on that kept her from strewing roses from her hat. I had seldom seen a young shrimp so above herself, and I, having Stinker's best interests at heart, packed all my troubles in the old kit bag for the time being, and rejoiced with her. If there's one thing Bertram Wooster is, and always has been, nippy at, it's forgetting his personal worries when a pal is celebrating some stroke of good fortune. For some time, Stiffy monopolised the conversation, not letting me get a word in edgeways. Women are singularly gifted in this respect. The frailest of them has the lung power of a gramophone record and the flow of speech of a regimental sergeant-major. I've known my Aunt Agatha to go on calling me names long after you would have supposed that both breath and inventiveness would have given out. Her theme was the stupendous bit of good luck which was about to befall Stinker's new parishioners, for they would be getting not only the perfect vicar, a saintly character who would do the square thing by their souls, but in addition the sort of vicar's wife you dream about. It was only when she paused after drawing a picture of herself doling out soup to the deserving poor and asking in a gentle voice after their rheumatism that I was able to rise to a point of order. In the midst of all the joyfulness and backslapping, a sobering thought had occurred to me. "I agree with you," I said, "that this would appear to be the happy ending, and I can quite see how you have arrived at the conclusion that it's the maddest, merriest day of all the glad new year. But there's something you ought to give the thought to, and it seems to me you're overlooking it." "What's that? I didn't think I'd missed anything." "This promise of Pop Bassett's to give you the vicarage. All in order, surely. What's your kick?" "I was only thinking that, if I were you, I'd get it in writing." This stopped her as if she'd bumped into a prop forward. The ecstatic animation faded from her face to be replaced by the anxious look and the quick chewing of the lower lip. It was plain that I had given her food for thought. "You don't think Uncle Watkin would double-cross us?" "There are no limits to what your foul Uncle Watkin can do if the mood takes him," I responded gravely. "I wouldn't trust him an inch. Where's Stinker?" "Out on the lawn, I think." "Then get hold of him and bring him here, and have Pop Bassett embody the thing in the form of a letter." "I suppose you know you're making my flesh creep." "Merely pointing out the road to safety." She mused a while, and the lower lip got a bit more chewing done to it. "All right," she said at length, "I'll fetch Harold." "And it wouldn't hurt to bring a couple of lawyers, too," I said as she whizzed past me. It was about 5 minutes later, as I was falling into a reverie, and brooding once more on the extreme stickiness of my affairs, that Jeeves came in and told me I was wanted on the telephone. Chapter 17. I paled beneath my tan. "Who is it, Jeeves?" "Mrs. Travers, sir." Precisely what I had feared. It was, as I have indicated, an easy drive from Totley Towers to Brinkley Court, and in his exhilarated state Gussie would no doubt have kept a firm foot on the accelerator and given the machine all the gas at his disposal. I presumed that he and girlfriend must have just arrived, and that this telephone call was Aunt Dahlia what-the-helling. Knowing how keenly the old bean resented being the recipient of anything in the nature of funny business, into which category Gus's butting in uninvited with his M in attendance would unquestionably fall, I braced myself for the coming storm with as much fortitude as I could muster. You may say, of course, that his rash act was no fault of mine and had nothing to do with me, but it's practically routine for aunts to blame nephews for everything that happens. It seems to be what nephews are for. It was only by an oversight, I've always felt, that my Aunt Agatha omitted to hold me responsible a year or two ago, when her son, young Thos, nearly got sacked from the scholastic institution which he attends for breaking out at night in order to go and shy for coconuts at the local amusement park. How did she seem, Jeeves? Sir? Did she give you the impression that she was splitting a gusset? Not particularly, sir. Mrs. Travers' voice is always robust. Would there be any reason why she should be splitting the gusset to which you refer? You bet there would. No time to tell you now, but the skies are darkening, and the air is full of V-shaped depressions off the coast of Iceland. I am sorry, sir. Nor are you the only one. Who was the fellow, or fellows, for I believe there was more than one, who went into the burning fiery furnace? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, sir. That's right. Their names were on the tip of my tongue. I read about them when I won my Scripture Knowledge Prize at school. Well, I know just how they must have felt. Aunt Dahlia, I said, for I had now reached the instrument. I had been expecting to have my ear scorched with well-chosen words, but to my surprise she seemed in merry mood. There was no suggestion of recrimination in her voice. "Hello there, you young menace to Western civilization," she boomed. "How are you? Still ticking over?" "To a certain extent. And you?" "I'm fine. Did I interrupt you in the middle of your 10th cocktail?" "My 3rd, I corrected. I usually stay steady at 2, but Pop Bassett insisted on replenishing my glass. He's a bit above himself at the moment, and very much the master of the revels. I wouldn't put it past him to have an ox roasted whole in the marketplace, if he can find an ox. Stinko, is he? Not perhaps stinko, but certainly effervescent. Well, if you can suspend your drunken orgy for a minute or two, I'll tell you the news from home. I got back from London a quarter of an hour ago, and what do you think I found waiting on the mat? That newt-collecting freak, Spink Bottle, accompanied by a girl who looks like a Pekingese with freckles. I drew a deep breath and embarked on my speech for the defence. If Bertram was to be put in the right light, now was the moment. True, her manner so far had been affable, and she had given no sign of being about to go off with a bang, but one couldn't be sure that that wasn't because she was just biding her time. It's never safe to dismiss aunts lightly at times like this. "Yes," I said, "I heard he was on his way, complete with freckled human Pekingese. I am sorry, Aunt Dahlia, that you should have been subjected to this unwarrantable intrusion, and I would like to make it abundantly clear that it was not the outcome of any advice or encouragement from me. I was in total ignorance of his intentions. Had he confided in me his purpose of inflicting his presence on you, I should have—" Here I paused, for she had asked me rather brusquely to put a sock in it. "Stop babbling, you ghastly young gas-bag. What's all this silver-tongued orator stuff about? I was merely expressing my regret that you should have been subjected—" "Well, don't! There's no need to apologize. I couldn't be more pleased. I admit that I'm always happier when I don't have Spink Bottle breathing down the back of my neck and taking up space in the house which I'd require for other purposes, but the girl was as welcome as manna in the wilderness." Having won that prize for Scripture Knowledge I was speaking of, I had no difficulty in grasping her allusion. She was referring to an incident which occurred when the children of Israel were crossing some desert or other, and were sorely in need of refreshment, rations being on the slender side. And they were just saying to one another how well a spot of manna would go down, and regretting that there was none in the quartermaster's stores, when blowed if a whole wad of the stuff didn't descend from the skies, just making their day. Her words had of course surprised me somewhat, and I asked her why Emerald Stoker had been as welcome as manna in the W. "Because her arrival brought sunshine into a stricken home. There couldn't have been a smoother bit of timing. You didn't see Anatole when you were over here this afternoon, did you?" "No. Why?" "I was wondering if you'd noticed anything wrong with him. Shortly after you left, he developed a malleau foie, whatever he called it, and took to his bed." I'm sorry, so was Tom. He was looking forward gloomily to a dinner cooked by the kitchen maid, who, though a gal of many sterling merits, always adopts the scorched earth policy when preparing a meal, and you know what his digestion's like. Conditions looked dark, and then Spinkbottle suddenly revealed that this Pekingese of his was an experienced chef, and she's taken over. Who is she? Do you know anything about her? I was, of course, able to supply the desired information. She's the daughter of a well-to-do American millionaire called Stoker, who I imagine will be full of strange oaths when he hears she's married Gussie, the latter being, as you will concede, not everybody's cup of tea. So he isn't going to marry Madeline Bassett? No, the fixture has been scratched. That's definite, is it? Yes. You can't have been much success as a raisonneur. No. Well, I think she'll make Spinkbottle a good wife. Seems a very nice gal. Few better. But this leaves you in rather a spot, doesn't it? If Madeline Bassett is now at large, won't she expect you to fill in? That, aged relative, is the fear that haunts me. Has Jeeves nothing to suggest? He says he hasn't, but I've known him on previous occasions to be temporarily baffled, and then suddenly to wave his magic wand and fix everything up, so I haven't entirely lost hope. No, I expect you'll wriggle out of it somehow, as you always do. I wish I had a fiver for every time you've been within a step of the altar rails, and have managed to escape unscathed. I remember you telling me once that you had faith in your star. Quite. Still, it's no good trying to pretend that peril doesn't loom. It looms like the dickens. The corner in which I find myself is tight. And you would like to get that way too, I suppose? All right, you can get back to your orgy when I told you why I rang you up. Haven't you? I said, surprised. Certainly not. You don't catch me wasting time and money chatting with you about your amours. Here is the nub. You know that black amber thing of Bassett's? The statuette? Of course. I want to buy it for Tom. I've come into a bit of money. The reason I went to London today was to see my lawyer about a legacy someone's left me. Old school friend, if that's of any interest to you. It works out at about a couple of £1,000, and I want you to get that statuette for me. It's going to be pretty hard to get away with it. Oh, you'll manage. Go as high as £1,500 if you have to. I suppose you couldn't just slip it in your pocket. It would save a lot of overhead, but probably that's asking too much of you. So tackle Bassett and get him to sell it. Well, I'll do my best. I know how much Uncle Tom covets that statuette. Rely on me, Aunt Dahlia. That's my boy. I returned to the drawing-room in somewhat pensive mood, for my relations with Pop Bassett were such that it was going to be embarrassing trying to do business with him, but I was relieved that the aged relative had dismissed the idea of purloining the thing. Surprised, too, as well as relieved, because the stern lesson association with her over the years has taught me is that when she wants to do a loved husband a good turn, she is seldom fussy about the methods employed to that end. It was she who had initiated, if that's the word I want, the theft of the cow creamer, and you would have thought she would have wanted to save money on the current deal. Her view has always been that if a collector pinches something from another collector, it doesn't count as stealing. And of course there may be something in it. Pop Bassett, when at Brinkley, would unquestionably have looted Uncle Tom's collection, had he not been closely watched. These collectors have about as much conscience as the smash-and-grab fellows for whom the police are always spreading dragnets. I was musing along these lines, and trying to think what would be the best way of approaching Pop, handicapped as I would be by the fact that he shuddered like a jelly in a high wind every time he saw me, and preferred when in my presence to sit and stare before him without uttering, when the door opened and Spode came in. Chapter 18. The first thing that impressed itself on the senses was that he had about as spectacular a black eye as you could meet with in a month of Sundays, and I found myself at a momentary loss to decide how it was best to react to it. I mean, some fellows with bunged-up eyes want sympathy, others prefer that you pretend that you've noticed nothing unusual in their appearance. I came to the conclusion that it was wisest to greet him with a careless "Ah, Spode," and I did so, though I suppose, looking back, that "Ah, Sidcup" would have been more suitable. And it was as I spoke that I became aware that he was glaring at me in a sinister manner, with the eye that wasn't closed. I have spoken of these eyes of his as being capable of opening an oyster at 60 paces, and even when only one of them was functioning, the impact of his gaze was disquieting. I have known my Aunt Agatha's gaze to affect me in the same way.
"I was looking for you, Worcester,"
he said. He uttered the words in the unpleasant, rasping voice which had once kept his followers on the jump. Before succeeding to his new title, he had been one of those dictators who were fairly common at one time in the metropolis, and had gone about with a mob of underlings wearing black shorts and shouting "Heil Spode," or words along those general lines. He gave it up when he became Lord Sidcup, but he was still apt to address all and sundry as if he were ticking off some erring member of his entourage whose shorts had got a patch on them. "Oh, were you?" I said.
"I was."
He paused for a moment, continuing to give me the eye. Then he said,
"So."
"So" is another of those things like "you" and "ha," which it's never easy to find the right answer to. Nothing in the way of a comeback suggested itself to me, so I merely lit a cigarette, in what I intended to be a nonchalant manner, though I may have missed it by a considerable margin, and he proceeded.
"So I was right,
"Eh?
in my suspicions.
Eh?
They have been confirmed.
Eh?"
Stop saying you miserable worm, and listen to me."
I humoured him. You might have supposed that, having so recently seen him knocked base over apex by the Rev. H.P. Pinker, and subsequently laid out cold by Emerald Stoker and her basin of beans, I would have regarded him with contempt as pretty small-time stuff, and rebuked him sharply for calling me a miserable worm. But the idea never so much as crossed my mind. He had suffered reverses, true, but they had left him with his spirit unbroken, and the muscles of his brawny arms just as much like iron bands as they had always been. And the way I looked at it was that if he wanted me to go easy on the word "a," he had only to say so. Continuing to pierce me with the eye that was still on duty, he said,
"I happened to be passing through the hall just now.
"Oh?
I heard you talking on the telephone.
Oh?
You were speaking to your aunt.
Oh?"
Don't keep saying, "Oh, blast you."
Well, these restrictions were making it a bit hard for me to hold up my end of the conversation, but there seemed nothing to be done about it. I maintained a rather dignified silence, and he resumed his remarks.
"Your aunt was urging you to steal Sir Watkin's amber statuette."
"She wasn't."
"Pardon me. I thought you would try to deny the charge, so I took the precaution of jotting down your actual words. The statuette was mentioned, and you said, 'It's going to be pretty hard to get away with it.' She then presumably urged you to spare no effort, for you said, 'Well, I'll do my best. I know how much Uncle Tom covets that statuette. Rely on me, Aunt Dahlia.' What the devil are you gargling about?"
"Not gargling," I corrected, "laughing lightly, because you've got the whole thing wrong. Though I must say the way you managed to record the dialogue does you a good deal of credit. Do you use shorthand?"
"How do you mean I've got it wrong?"
"Aunt Dahlia was asking me to try to buy the thing from Sir Watkin." He snorted and said "ha," and I thought it a bit unjust that he should say "ha" if I wasn't allowed to say "a" and "o." There should always be a certain give and take in these matters, or where are you?
"Do you expect me to believe that?"
"Don't you believe it?"
"No, I don't. I'm not an ass."
This, of course, was a debatable point, as I once heard Jeeves describe it, but I didn't press it.
"I know that aunt of yours," he proceeded. "She would steal the filling out of your back teeth if she thought she could do it without detection."
He paused for a moment, and I knew that he was thinking of the cow creamer. He had always, and I must admit not without reason, suspected the old flesh and blood of being the motive force behind its disappearance, and I imagine it had been a nasty knock to him that nothing could be proved.
"Well, I strongly advise you, Worcester, not to let her make a cat's paw of you this time, because if you're caught, as you certainly will be, you'll be for it. Don't think that Sir Watkin will hush the thing up to avoid a scandal. You'll go to prison, that's where you'll go. He dislikes you intensely, and nothing would please him more than to be able to give you a long stretch without the option."
I thought this showed a vindictive spirit in the old warthog, and one that I deplored, but I felt it would be injudicious to say so. I merely nodded understandingly. I was thankful that there was no danger of this contingency, as Jeeves would have called it, arising. Strong in the knowledge that nothing would induce me to pinch their ruddy statuette, I was able to remain calm and nonchalant, or as calm and nonchalant as you can be when a fellow 8'6" in height with one eye bunged up, and the other, behaving like an oxyacetylene blowpipe, is glaring at you.
"Yes, sir," said Spode. "It'll be choky for you."
and he was going on to say that he would derive great pleasure from coming on visiting days and making faces at me through the bars, when Pop Bassett returned. But a very different Bassett from the fizzy rejoicer who had exited so short a while before. Then he had been all buck and beans, as any father would have been whose daughter was not going to marry Gussie Finknottle. Now his face was drawn, and his general demeanour that of an incautious luncher who discovers when there is no time to draw back that he has swallowed a rather too elderly oyster.
"Madeline tells me," he began.
Then he saw Spode's eye and broke off. It was the sort of eye which, even if you have a lot on your mind, you can't help noticing.
"Good gracious, Roderick," he said. "Did you have a fall?"
"Fall my foot," said Spode. "I was socked by a curate."
"Good heavens! What curate?"
"There's only one in these parts, isn't there?"
"You mean you were assaulted by Mr. Pinker? You astound me, Roderick."
Spode spoke with genuine feeling.
"Not half as much as he astounded me. He was more or less of a revelation to me, I don't mind telling you, because I didn't know curates had left hooks like that. He's got a knack of fainting you off balance, and then coming in with a sort of corkscrew punch, which is impossible not to admire. I must get him to teach it to me sometime."
"You speak as though you bore him no animosity."
"Of course I don't. Very pleasant little scrap with no ill feeling on either side. I've nothing against Pinker. The one I've got it in for is the cook. She beamed me with a china basin, from behind of all unsporting things. If you'll excuse me, I'll go and have a word with that cook."
He was so obviously looking forward to telling Emerald Stoker what he thought of her that it gave me quite a pang to have to break it to him that his errand would be bootless. "You can't," I pointed out. "She is no longer with us."
"Don't be an ass. She's in the kitchen, isn't she?"
"I'm sorry, no. She's eloped with Gussie Finknottle. A wedding has been arranged and will take place as soon as the Archbishop of Canterbury lets him have a special licence." Spode reeled. He had only one eye to stare at me with, but he got all the mileage out of it that was possible.
"Is that true?"
"Absolutely."
"Well, that makes up for everything. If Madeline's back in circulation... Thank you for telling me, Worcester, old chap."
"Don't mention it, Spode, old man, or rather, Lord Sidcup, old man." For the first time, Pop Bassett appeared to become aware that the slight, distinguished-looking young fellow standing on one leg by the sofa was Bertram.
"Mr. Worcester,"
he said. Then he stopped, swallowed once or twice, and groped his way to the table where the drinks were. His manner was feverish. Having passed a liberal snootful down the hatch, he was able to resume.
"I have just seen Madeline."
"Oh, yes," I said courteously. "How is she?"
"Off her head, in my opinion. She says she is going to marry you."
Well, I had more or less steeled myself to something along these lines, so except for quivering like a stricken blancmange and letting my lower jaw fall perhaps 6 inches, I betrayed no sign of discomposure, in which respect I differed radically from Spode, who reeled for the second time and uttered a cry like that of a cinnamon bear that has stubbed its toe on a passing rock.
"You're joking!"
Pop Bassett shook his head regretfully. His face was haggard.
"I wish I were, Roderick. I am not surprised that you are upset. I feel the same myself. I am distraught. I can see no light on the horizon. When she told me, it was as if I had been struck by a thunderbolt."
Spode was staring at me aghast. Even now it seemed he was unable to take in the full horror of the situation. There was incredulity in his one good eye.
"But she can't marry that."
"She seems resolved to."
"But he's worse than that fish-faced blighter."
"I agree with you. Far worse. No comparison."
"I'll go and talk to her,"
said Spode, and left us before I could express my resentment at being called that. It was perhaps fortunate that only half a minute later Stiffy and Stinker entered, for if I had been left alone with Pop Bassett, I should have been hard put to it to hit on a topic of conversation calculated to interest, elevate, and amuse. Chapter 19. Stinker's nose, as was only to be expected, had swollen a good deal since last heard from, but he seemed in excellent spirits, and Stiffy couldn't have been merrier and brighter. Both were obviously thinking in terms of the happy ending, and my heart bled freely for the unfortunate young slobs. I had observed Pop Bassett closely while Spode was telling him about Stinker's left hook, and what I had read on his countenance had not been encouraging. These patrons of livings with vicarages to bestow always hold rather rigid views as regards the qualifications they demand from the curates they are thinking of promoting to fields of higher activity, and left hooks, however adroit, are not among them. If Pop Bassett had been a fight promoter on the lookout for talent, and Stinker a promising novice, anxious to be put on his next programme for a 6th-round preliminary bout, he would no doubt have gazed on him with a kindly eye. As it was, the eye he was now directing at him was as cold and bleak as if an old crony had been standing before him in the dock, charged with having moved pigs without a permit, or failed to abate a smoky chimney. I could see trouble looming, and I wouldn't have risked a bet on the Happy E, even at the most liberal odds. The stickiness of the atmosphere, so patent to my keener sense, had not communicated itself to Stiffy. No voice was whispering in her ear that she was about to be let down with a thud which would jar her to the back teeth. She was all smiles and whatever the word is, plainly convinced that the signing on the dotted line was now a mere formality. "Here we are, Uncle Watkin," she said, beaming freely. "So I see. I brought Harold." "So I perceive. We've talked it over, and we think we ought to have the thing embodied in the form of a letter." Pop Bassett's eye grew colder and bleaker, and the feeling I had that we were all back in Bosher Street Police Court deepened. Nothing, it seemed to me, was needed to complete the illusion, except a magistrate's clerk with a cold in the head, a thug you could cut with a knife, and a few young barristers hanging about hoping for dock briefs.
"I fear I do not understand you,"
he said.
"Oh, come, Uncle Watkin, you know you're brighter than that. I'm talking about Harold's vicarage." "I was not aware that Mr. Pinker had a vicarage."
"The one you're going to give him, I mean."
"Oh?"
said Pop Bassett, and I have seldom heard an O that had a nastier sound.
"I have just seen Roderick,"
he added, getting down to the raise. At the mention of Spode's name, Stiffy giggled, and I could have told her it was a mistake. There is a time for girlish frivolity, and a time when it is misplaced. It had not escaped my notice that Pop Bassett had begun to swell like one of those curious circular fish you catch down in Florida, and in addition to this he was rumbling, as I imagine volcanoes do, before starting in on the neighbouring householders and making them wish they had settled elsewhere. But even now Stiffy seemed to have no sense of impending doom. She uttered another silvery laugh. I've noticed this slowness in getting hep to atmospheric conditions in other girls. The young of the gentler sex never appear to realize that there are moments when the last thing required by their audience is the silvery laugh. "I bet he had a shiner."
"I beg your pardon?"
"Was his eye black?"
"It was."
"I thought it would be. Harold's strength is as the strength of 10, because his heart is pure. Well, how about that embodying letter? I have a fountain pen. Let's get the show on the road." I was expecting Pop Bassett to give an impersonation of a bomb falling on an ammunition dump, but he didn't. Instead, he continued to exhibit that sort of chilly stiffness which you see in magistrates when they're fining people 5 quid for boyish peccadilloes.
"You appear to be under a misapprehension, Stephanie," he said in the metallic voice he had once used when addressing the prisoner Worcester. "I have no intention of entrusting Mr. Pinker with a vicarage."
Stiffy took it big. She shook from wind-swept hairdo to shoe-sole, and if she hadn't clutched at Stinker's arm, might have taken a toss. One could understand her emotion. She had been coasting along, confident that she had it made, and suddenly, out of a blue and smiling sky, these words of doom. No doubt it was the suddenness and unexpectedness of the wallop that unmanned her, if you can call it unmanning when it happens to a girl. I suppose she was feeling very much as Spode had felt when Emerald Stoker's basin had connected with his occiput. Her eyes bulged, and her voice came out in a passionate squeak. "But, Uncle Watkin, you promised!" I could have told her she was wasting her breath trying to appeal to the old buzzard's better feelings, because magistrates, even when ex, don't have any. The tremolo in her voice might have been expected to melt what is usually called a heart of stone, but it had no more effect on Pop Bassett than the chirping of the household canary. "Provisionally only," he said. "I was not aware, when I did so, that Mr. Pinker had brutally assaulted Roderick." At these words, Stinker, who had been listening to the exchanges in a rigid sort of way, creating the illusion that he'd been stuffed by a good taxidermist, came suddenly to life, though as all he did was make a sound like the last drops of water going out of a bathtub, it was hardly worth the trouble and expense. He succeeded, however, in attracting Pop Bassett's attention, and the latter gave him the eye.
Yes, Mr. Pinker?
It was a moment or two before Stinker followed up the gurgling noise with speech, and even then it wasn't much in the way of speech. He said,
Proceed, Mr. Pinker.
It wasn't...
If you could make yourself a little plainer, Mr. Pinker, it would be a great assistance to our investigations into the matter under discussion. I must confess to finding you far from lucid.
It was the type of crack he had been accustomed in the old Bosher Street days to seeing in print, with laughter after it in brackets, but on this occasion it fell flatter than a Dover sole. It didn't get a snicker out of me, nor out of Stinker, who merely knocked over a small china ornament and turned a deeper vermilion, while Stiffy came back at him in great shape.
There's no need to talk like a magistrate, Uncle Watkin. I beg your pardon?
In fact, it would be better if you stopped talking at all and let me explain. What Harold's trying to tell you is that he didn't brutally assault Roderick. Roderick brutally assaulted him.
Indeed? That was not the way I heard the story.
Well, that's the way it happened.
I am perfectly willing to hear your version of the deplorable incident.
All right, then, here it comes. Harold was cooing to Roderick like a turtle dove, and Roderick suddenly hauled off and plugged him squarely on the beezer. If you don't believe me, take a look at it. The poor angel spouted blood like a Versailles fountain. Well, what do you have expected Harold to do? Turn the other nose?
I would have expected him to remember his position as a clerk in holy orders.
He should have complained to me, and I would have seen to it that Roderick made ample apology. A sound like the shot heard round the world rang through the room. It was Stiffy snorting. "Apology?" she cried, having got the snort out of her system. "What's the good of apologies? Harold took the only possible course. He sailed in and laid Roderick out cold, as anyone would have done in his place."
Anyone who had not his cloth to think of.
"For goodness sake, Uncle Watkin, a fellow can't be thinking of cloth all the time. It was an emergency. Roderick was murdering Gussie Finknottle."
"And Mr. Pinker stopped him? Great heavens!"
There was a pause, while Pop Bassett struggled with his feelings. Then Stiffy, as Stinker had done with Spode, had a shot at the honeyed word. She had spoken of Stinker cooing to Spode like a turtle dove, and if memories served me aright, that was just how he had cooed, and it was of a cooing turtle dove that she now reminded me. Like most girls, she can always get a melting note into her voice if she thinks there's any percentage to be derived from it. "It's not like you, Uncle Watkin, to go back on your solemn promise." I could have corrected her there. I would have thought it was just like him. "I can't believe it's really you who's doing this cruel thing to me. It's so unlike you. You've always been so kind to me. You've made me love and respect you. I've come to look on you as a second father. Don't louse the whole thing up now." A powerful plea, which with any other man would undoubtedly have brought home the bacon. With Pop Bassett it didn't get to first base. He had been looking like a man with no bowels, of compassion I mean, of course, and he went on looking like one.
"If by that peculiar expression you intend to imply that you are expecting me to change my mind and give Mr. Pinker this vicarage, I must disappoint you. I shall do no such thing. I consider he has shown himself unfit to be a vicar, and I am surprised that after what has occurred he can reconcile it with his conscience to continue his duties as a curate." Strong stuff, of course, and it drew from Stinker what may have been a hollow groan, or may have been a hiccup. I myself looked coldly at the old egg, and I rather think I curled my lip, though I should say it was very doubtful if he noticed my scorn, for his attention was earmarked for Stiffy. She had turned almost as scarlet as Stinker, and I heard a distinct click as her front teeth met. It was through these teeth, clenched, that she spoke. "So that's how you feel about it?" "It is."
"Your decision is final?"
"Quite final."
"Nothing will move you?"
"Nothing."
"I see," said Stiffy, having chewed the lower lip for a space in silence. "Well, you'll be sorry."
"I disagree with you."
"You will. Just wait. Bitter remorse is coming to you, Uncle Watkin."
Never underestimate the power of woman,
said Stiffy, and with a choking sob, though there again it may have been a hiccup, she rushed from the room. She had scarcely left us when Butterfield entered, and Pop Bassett eyed him with the ill-concealed petulance with which men of testy habit eye butlers who butt in at the wrong moment.
Yes, Butterfield, what is it? What is it?
Constable Oates desires a word with you, sir.
Who?
Police Constable Oates, sir.
What does he want?
I gather that he has a clue to the identity of the boy who threw a hard-boiled egg at you, sir. The words acted on Pop Bassett as I'm told the sound of bugles acts on war horses, not that I've ever seen a war horse. His whole demeanour changed in a flash. His face lit up, and there came into it the sort of look you see on the faces of bloodhounds when they settle down to the trail. He didn't actually say whoopee, but that was probably because the expression was not familiar to him. He was out of the room in a matter of seconds, Butterfield lying some lengths behind, and Stinker, who had been replacing a framed photograph which he'd knocked off a neighbouring table, addressed me in what you might call a hushed voice.
I say, Bertie, what do you think Stiffy meant when she said that?
I, too, had been speculating as to what the young pipsqueak had in mind. A sinister thing to say, it seemed to me. Those words, just wait, had an ominous ring. I weighed his question gravely. Difficult to decide, I said. It may be one thing, or it may be another.
She has such an impulsive nature.
Very impulsive.
It makes me uneasy.
Why, you? Pop B's the one who ought to be feeling uneasy. Knowing her as I do, if I were in his place... The sentence I had begun would, if it had come to fruition, have concluded with the words, I'd pack a few necessaries in a suitcase and go to Australia. But as I was about to utter them, I chanced to glance out of the window, and they froze on my lips. The window looked on the drive, and from where I was standing, I got a good view of the front steps, and when I saw what was coming up those front steps, my heart leapt from its base. It was Plank. There was no mistaking that square, tanned face and that purposeful walk of his. And when I reflected that in about a couple of ticks Butterfield would be showing him into the drawing-room where I stood, and we would meet once more, I confess that I was momentarily at a loss to know how to proceed. My first thought was to wait till he'd got through the front door, and then nip out of the window, which was conveniently open. That, I felt, was what Napoleon would have done. And I was just about to get the show on the road, as Stiffy would have said, when I saw the dog Bartholomew coming sauntering along, and I knew that I would be compelled to revise my strategy from the bottom up. You can't go climbing out of windows under the eyes of an Aberdeen terrier so prone as Bartholomew was, always to think the worst. In due season, no doubt, he would learn that what he had taken for a burglar escaping with the swag had been in reality a harmless guest to the house, and would be all apologies, but by that time my lower slopes would be as full of holes as a Swiss cheese. Falling back on my second line of defence, I slid behind the sofa, with a muttered, not a word to a soul, Stinker, chap I don't want to meet, and was nestling there like a turtle in its shell when the door opened. Chapter 20. It's pretty generally recognised at the Drones Club and elsewhere that Bertram Wooster is a man who knows how to keep the chin up and the upper lip stiff, no matter how rough the going may be. Beneath the bludgeonings of fate, his head is bloody but unbowed, as the fellow said. In a word, he can take it. But I must admit that as I crouched in my haven of refuge, I found myself chafing not a little. Life at Totley Towers, as I mentioned earlier, had got me down. There seemed no way of staying put in the darned house. One was either soaring like an eagle onto the top of chests, or whizzing down behind sofas like a diving duck. And apart from the hustle and bustle of it all, that sort of thing wounds the spirit, and does no good to the trouser crease. And so, as I say, I chafed. I was becoming increasingly bitter about this man Plank, and the tendency he seemed to be developing of haunting me like a family spectre. I couldn't imagine what he was doing here. Whatever the faults of Totley Towers, I had supposed that when there, one would at least be free from his society. He had an excellent home in Hockley-cum-Meston, and one sought in vain for an explanation of why the hell he didn't stay in it. My disapproval extended to the personnel of the various native tribes he had encountered in the course of his explorations. On his own showing, he had for years been horning in uninvited on the aborigines of Brazil, the Congo, and elsewhere, and not one of them apparently had had the enterprise to go after him with a spear, or to say it with poisoned darts from the family blowpipe. And these were fellows who called themselves savages. Savages, forsooth! The savages in the books I used to read in my childhood would have had him in the obituary column before he could say what ho. But with the ones you get nowadays, it's all slackness and laissez-faire. Can't be bothered. Leave it to somebody else. Let George do it. One sometimes wonders what the world's coming to. From where I sat, my range of vision was necessarily a bit restricted, but I was able to see a pair of empire-building brogue shoes, so I assumed that when the door had opened it was Butterfield showing him in, and this surmise was confirmed a moment later when he spoke. His was a voice which, once heard, lingers in the memory.
"Afternoon,"
he said.
Good afternoon,
Said Stinker.
"Warm day.
very warm.
What's been going on here? What are all these tents and swings and things in the park?"
Stinker explained that the annual school treat had only just concluded, and Plank expressed his gratification at having missed it. School treats, he said, were dashed dangerous things, always to be avoided by the shrewd, as they were only too apt to include competitions for bonny babies.
"Did you have a competition for bunny babies?"
Yes, we did, as a matter of fact. The mothers always insist on it.
"The mothers are the ones you want to watch out for," said Plank. "I'm not saying the little beasts aren't bad enough themselves, dribbling out of the side of their mouths at you and all that sort of thing, but it's the mothers who constitute the really grave peril. Look," he said,
and I think he must at this point have pulled up a trouser leg.
"See that scar on my calf? That's what I got in Peru once for being fool enough to let myself be talked into judging a competition for bonny babies. The mother of one of the honourably mentioned spiked me in the leg with a native dagger as I was stepping down to the judge's stand after making my speech. Hurt like sin, I can assure you, and still gives me a twinge when the weather's wet. Fellow I know is fond of saying that the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. Whether this is so or not I couldn't tell you, but it certainly knows how to handle a Peruvian dagger."
I found myself revising to some extent the rather austere opinion I had formed of the slackness and lack of ginger of the modern native. The males might have lost their grip in recent years, but the female element, it seemed, still had the right stuff in them, though of course where somebody like Plank is concerned, a stab in the fleshy part of the leg is only a step in the right direction, merely scratching the surface, as you might say. Plank continued chatty.
"You live in these parts?" he said.
Yes, I live in the village.
"Totley?
Yes.
Don't run a rugger club in Totley, do you?"
Stinker replied in the negative. The Totley and the Wold athletes, he said, preferred the association code, and Plank, probably shuddering, said,
"Good God! You ever played rugger?"
A little.
"You should take it up seriously. No finer sport. I'm trying to make the Hockley-cum-Meston team the talk of Gloucestershire. I coach the boys daily, and they're coming along very nicely indeed. What I need is a good prop forward."
What he got was Pop Bassett, who came bustling in at this moment. He good afternoon Planked, and Plank responded in suitable terms.
"Very nice of you to look me up, Plank," said Pop. "Will you have something to drink?"
"Ah," said Plank, and you could see that he meant it.
"I would ask you to stay to dinner, but unfortunately one of my guests has eloped with the cook."
Dashed sensible of him if he's going to elope with anyone. Very hard to find these days, cooks.
"It has, of course, completely disorganized our domestic arrangements. Neither my daughter nor my niece is capable of preparing even the simplest meal."
You'll have to go to the pub.
"It seems the only solution."
If you were in West Africa, you could drop in and take potluck with the native chief.
"I am not in West Africa,"
said Pop Bassett, speaking, I thought, a little testily, and I can understand him feeling a bit miffed. It's always annoying when you're up against it, and people tell you what a jolly time you could be having if you weren't, and how topping everything would be if you were somewhere where you aren't.
"I dined out a good deal in West Africa," said Plank. "Capital dinners some of those fellows used to give me, I remember, though there was always the drawback that you could never be sure the main dish wasn't one of their wives' relations broiled over a slow fire and disguised in some native sauce. Took the edge off your appetite, unless you were feeling particularly peckish."
"So I would be disposed to imagine."
"All a matter of taste, of course."
"Quite. Was there something you particularly wished to see me about, Plank?"
"No, nothing that I can think of."
"Then, if you will excuse me, I will be getting back to Madeline."
"Who's Madeline?"
"My daughter. Your arrival interrupted me in a serious talk I was having with her."
"Something wrong with the girl?"
"Something extremely wrong. She is contemplating making a disastrous marriage."
"All marriages are disastrous,"
said Plank, who gave one the impression, reading between the lines, that he was a bachelor.
They lead to bonny babies, and bonny babies lead to bonny baby competitions. I was telling my friend here of an experience I had in Peru, and showing him the scar on my leg, the direct result of being ass enough to judge one of these competitions. Would you care to see the scar on my leg?
Some other time, perhaps.
Any time that suits you. Why is this marriage you say she's contemplating so disastrous?
Because Mr. Worcester is not a suitable husband for her.
Who's Mr. Worcester?
The man she wishes to marry. A typical young wastrel of the type so common nowadays.
I used to know a fellow called Worcester, but I don't suppose it can be the same chap, because my Worcester was eaten by a crocodile on the Zambezi the other day, which rather rules him out. All right, Bassett, you pop back to the girl and tell her from me that if she's going to start marrying every Tom, Dick and Harry she comes across, she ought to have her head examined. If she'd seen as many native chiefs' wives as I have, she wouldn't be wanting to make such an ass of herself. Dickens of a life they lead, those women. Nothing to do but grind maize meal and have bonny babies. Righto, Bassett, don't let me keep you.
There came the sound of a closing door as Pop Bassett sped on his way, and Plank turned his attention to Stinker. He said,
I didn't tell that old ass, because I didn't want him sticking around in here talking his head off, but as a matter of fact, I did come about something special. Do you happen to know where I can find a chap called Pinker?
My name's Pinker.
Are you sure? I thought Bassett said it was Worcester.
No, Worcester's the one who's going to marry Sir Watkins' daughter.
So he is. It all comes back to me now. I wonder if you can be the fellow I want. The Pinker I'm after is a curate.
I'm a curate.
You are? Yes, by Jove, you're perfectly right. I see your collar buttons at the back. You're not Sir H.P. Pinker by any chance?
Yes.
Prop forward for Oxford in England a few years ago?
Yes.
Well, would you be interested in becoming a vicar?
There was a crashing sound, and I knew that Stinker in his emotion must have upset his customary table. After a while, he said in a husky voice that the one thing he wanted was to get his hooks on a vicarage, or words to that effect, and Plank said he was glad to hear it.
My chap at Hockley-cum-Meston is downing tools now that his 90th birthday is approaching, and I've been scouring the countryside for a spare. Extraordinarily difficult the quest has been, because what I wanted was a vicar who was a good prop forward, and it isn't often you find a parson who knows one end of the football from another. I've never seen you play, I'm sorry to say, because I've been abroad so much, but with your record you must obviously be outstanding, so you can take up your duties as soon as old Bellamy goes into storage. When I get home I'll embody the thing in a form of a letter.
Stinker said he didn't know how to thank him, and Plank said that was all right, no need of any thanks.
I'm the one who ought to be grateful. We're all right at half-back and three-quarters, but we lost to upper breaching last year simply because our prop forward proved a broken reed. This year we'll show them. Amazing bit of luck finding you, and I could never have done it if it hadn't been for a friend of mine, a Chief Inspector Witherspoon of Scotland Yard. He phoned me just now and told me that you were to be found at Totley in the Wold. He said if I called at Totley Towers they'd give me your address. Extraordinary how these Scotland Yard fellows nose things out, the result of years of practice, I suppose. What was that noise?
Stinker said he had heard nothing.
Sort of gasping noise seemed to come from behind that sofa. Take a look.
I was aware for a moment of Stinker's face peering down at me, then he turned away.
There's nothing behind the sofa,
he said, very decently imperiling his immortal soul by falsifying the facts on behalf of a pal.
Thought it might be a dog being sick, said Plank.
I suppose it had sounded rather like that. The revelation of Jeeves's black treachery had shaken me to my foundations, causing me to forget that in the existing cirque silence was golden. A silly thing to do, of course, to gasp like that, but dash it, if for years you have nursed a gentleman's personal gentleman in your bosom, and out of a blue sky you find that he has deliberately sicked Brazilian explorers onto you, I maintain that you're fully entitled to behave like a dog in the throes of nausea. I could make nothing of his scurvy conduct, and was so stunned that for a minute or two I lost the thread of the conversation. When the mists cleared, Plank was speaking, and the subject had been changed.
I wonder how Bassett is getting on with that daughter of his. Do you know anything of this chap, Worcester?
He's one of my best friends.
Bassett doesn't seem too fond of him.
No.
Ah, well, we all have our likes and dislikes. Which of the two girls is this Madeline he was speaking of? I've never met them, but I've seen them around. Is she the little squirt with the large blue eyes?
I should imagine Stinker didn't care over much for hearing his loved one described as a little squirt, though reason must have told him that that was precisely what she was. But he replied without heat,
No, that's Sir Watkins' niece, Stephanie Byng.
Byng? Now, why does that name seem to ring a bell? Oh, yes, of course, old Johnny Byng, who was with me on one of my expeditions. Red-haired fellow, haven't seen him for years. He was bitten by a puma, poor chap, and they tell me he still hesitates in a rather noticeable manner before sitting down. Stephanie Byng, eh? You know her, of course.
Very well.
Nice girl?
That's how she seems to me, and if you don't mind, I'll be going and telling her the good news.
What good news?
About the vicarage.
Oh, yes. You think she'll be interested?
I'm sure she will. We're going to be married.
Good God! No chance of getting out of it?
I don't want to get out of it.
Amazing! I once hitchhiked all the way from Johannesburg to Cape Town to avoid getting married, and here you are, seeming quite pleased at the prospect. Oh, well, no account of your tastes. All right, you run along, and I suppose I'd better have a word with Bassett before I leave. Fella bores me stiff, but one has to be civil.
The door closed, and silence fell, and after waiting a few minutes, just in case, I felt it was safe to surface. And I had just done so, and was limbering up the limbs, which had become somewhat cramped, when the door opened, and Jeeves came in, carrying a tray. Chapter 21.
Good evening, sir, he said. Would you care for an appetizer? I was obliging Mr. Butterfield by bringing them. He is engaged at the moment in listening at the door of the room where Sir Watkin is in conference with Miss Bassett. He tells me he is compiling his memoirs, never misses an opportunity of gathering suitable material.
I gave the man one of my looks. My face was cold and hard, like a school-treat egg. I can't remember a time when I've been fuller of righteous indignation. What I want, Jeeves, is not a slab of wet bread with a dead sardine on it.
Anchovy, sir.
Or anchovy. I am in no mood to split straws. I require an explanation, and a categorical one at that. Sir, you can't evade the issue by saying, sir. Answer me this, Jeeves, with a simple yes or no. Why did you tell Plank to come to Totley Towers? I thought the query would crumple him up like a damp sock, but he didn't so much as shuffle a foot.
My heart was melted by Miss Bing's tale of her misfortunes, sir. I chanced to encounter the young lady, and found her in a state of considerable despondency, as the result of Sir Watkin's refusal to bestow a vicarage on Mr. Pinker. I perceived immediately that it was within my power to alleviate her distress. I had learned at the post office at Hockley-cum-Meston that the incumbent there was retiring shortly, and being cognizant of Major Plank's desire to strengthen the Hockley-cum-Meston forward line, I felt that it would be an excellent idea to place him in communication with Mr. Pinker. In order to be in a position to marry Miss Bing, Mr. Pinker requires a vicarage, and in order to compete successfully with rival villages in the football arena, Major Plank is in need of a vicar with Mr. Pinker's wide experience as a prop forward. Their interests appeared to me to be identical.
Well, it worked all right. Stinker has clicked.
He is to succeed Mr. Bellamy as incumbent at Hockley-cum-Meston.
As soon as Bellamy calls it a day.
I am very happy to hear it, sir.
I didn't reply for a while, being obliged to attend to a sudden touch of cramp. This ironed out, I said, still icy, you may be happy, but I haven't been for the last quarter of an hour or so, nestling behind the sofa and expecting Plank at any moment to unmask me. It didn't occur to you to envisage what would happen if he met me.
I was sure that your keen intelligence would enable you to find a means of avoiding him, sir, as indeed it did. You concealed yourself behind the sofa, on all fours. A very shrewd manoeuvre on your part, if I may say so, sir. It showed a resource and swiftness of thought which it would be difficult to overpraise.
My iciness melted. It is not too much to say that I was mollified. It's not often that I'm given the old oil in this fashion, most of my circle, notably my Aunt Agatha, being more prone to the slam than the rave. And it was only after I had been savouring that keen intelligence gag, if savouring is the word I want, for some moments, that I suddenly remembered that marriage with Madeline Bassett loomed ahead, and I gave a start so visible that he asked me if I was feeling unwell. I shook the loaf. Physically, no, Jeeves. Spiritually, yes.
I do not quite understand you, sir.
Well, here is the news, and this is Bertram Wooster reading it. I'm going to be married.
Indeed, sir?
Yes, Jeeves, married. The banns are as good as up.
Would it be taking a liberty if I were to ask?
Who to? You don't need to ask. Gussie Fink-Nottle has eloped with Emerald Stoker, thus creating what is it?
Would vacuum be the word you are seeking, sir?
That's right, a vacuum which I shall have to fill, unless you can think of some way of getting me out of it.
I will devote considerable thought to the matter, sir.
Thank you, Jeeves, I said, and would have spoken further, but at this moment I saw the door opening, and speechlessness supervened.
But it wasn't, as I had feared, Plank. It was only Stiffy. "Hello, you two," she said. "I'm looking for Harold." I could see at a G that Jeeves had been right in describing her demeanour as despondent. The brow was clouded, and the general appearance that of an overwrought soul. I was glad to be in a position to inject a little sunshine into her life. Pigeonholing my own troubles for future reference, I said, "He's looking for you. He has a strange story to relate. You know Plank. What about him?" "I'll tell you what about him. Plank to you, hitherto, has been merely a shadowy figure who hangs out at Hockley-cum-Meston and sells black amber statuettes to people, but he has another side to him." She betrayed a certain impatience. "You think I'm interested in Plank, aren't you?" "No, I'm not." "You will be. He has, as I was saying, another side to him. He is a landed proprietor with vicarages in his gift, and to cut a long story down to a short, as one always likes to do when possible, he has just given one to Stinker." I had been right in supposing that the information would have a marked effect on her dark mood. I have never actually seen a corpse spring from its bier and start being the life and soul of the party, but I should imagine that its deportment would closely resemble that of this young Bing, as the impact of my words came home to her. A sudden light shot into her eyes, which, as Plank had correctly said, were large and blue, and an ecstatic, "Well, Lord love a duck," escaped her. Then doubts seemed to creep in, for the eyes clouded over again. "Is this true? Absolutely official? You aren't pulling my leg?" I drew myself up rather haughtily. "I wouldn't dream of pulling your leg. Do you think Bertram Wooster is the sort of chap who thinks it's funny to raise people's hopes only to, what, Jeeves?"
Dash them to the ground, sir.
"Thank you, Jeeves. Not at all, sir. You may take this information as coming straight from the mouth of the stable cat. I was present when the deal went through. Behind the sofa, but present." She still seemed at a loss. "I don't understand. Plank has never met Harold. Jeeves brought them together. Did you, Jeeves?"
Yes, miss.
"Atta boy.
Thank you, miss.
And he's barely given Harold a vicarage?" "The vicarage of Hockley-cum-Meston. He's embodying it in the form of a letter tonight. At the moment there's a vicar still vicking, but he's infirm and old and wants to turn it up as soon as they can put on an understudy. The way things look, I should imagine that we should be able to unleash Stinker on the Hockley-cum-Meston souls in the course of the next few days." My simple words and earnest manner had resolved the last of her doubts. The misgivings she may have had as to whether this was the real Ginger vanished. Her eyes shone more like twin stars than anything, and she uttered animal cries and danced a few dance steps. Presently she paused and put a question. "What's Plank like?" "How do you mean, what's he like? He hasn't a beard, has he?" "No, no beard." "That's good, because I want to kiss him, and if he had a beard it would give me pause." "Dismiss the notion," I urged, for Plank's psychology was an open book to me. The whole trend of that confirmed bachelor's conversation had left me with the impression that he would find it infinitely preferable to be spiked in the leg with a native dagger than to have Popsies covering his upturned face with kisses. He'd have a fit. "Well, I must kiss somebody. Shall I kiss you, Jeeves?"
No, thank you, miss.
"You, Bertie?" "I'd rather you didn't. Then I've a good mind to go and kiss Uncle Watkin, louse of the first water though he has recently shown himself." "How do you mean, recently?" "And having kissed him, I shall tell him the news, and taunt him vigorously with having let a good thing get away from him. I shall tell him that when he declined to avail himself of Harold's services, he was like the Indian." I did not get her drift. "What Indian?" "The base one my governesses used to make me read about. The poor simp whose hand... How does it go, Jeeves?"
"Threw a pearl away richer than all his tribe, miss."
"That's right, and I shall tell him I hope the vicar he does get will be a weed of a man who has a chronic cold in the head and bleats. Oh, by the way, talking of Uncle Watkin reminds me, I shan't have any use for this now." And so speaking, she produced the black amber I saw from the recesses of her costume, like a conjurer taking a rabbit out of a hat. Chapter 22. It was as if she had suddenly exhibited a snake of the lowest order. I gazed at the thing, appalled. It needed but this to put the frosting on the cake. "Where did you get that?" I asked in a voice that was low and trembled. "I pinched it." "What on earth did you do that for?" Perfectly simple. The idea was to go to Uncle Watkin and tell him he wouldn't get it back unless he did the square thing by Harold. Power politics, don't they call it, Jeeves?
Or blackmail, miss?
Yes, or blackmail, I suppose, but you can't be too nice in your methods when you're dealing with the Uncle Watkins of this world. But now that Plank has eased the situation and made our paths straight, of course I shan't need it, and I suppose the shrewd thing is to return it to store before its absence is noted. Go and put it in the collection room, Bertie. Here's the key. I recoiled as if she'd offered me the dog Bartholomew. Priding myself as I do on being a preux chevalier, I like to oblige the delicate nurtured when it's feasible. But there are moments when only a nolle prosequi will serve, and I recognized this as one of them. The thought of making the perilous passage she was suggesting gave me goose pimples. I'm not going near the ruddy collection room. With my luck, I'd find your Uncle Watkin there, arm in arm with Spode, and it wouldn't be too easy to explain what I was doing there and how I'd got in. Besides, I can't go roaming about the place with Plank on the premises. She laughed, one of those silvery ones, a practice to which, as I have indicated, she was far too much addicted. Jeeves told me about you and Plank. Very funny. I'm glad you think so. We personally were not amused. Jeeves, as always, found the way.
If you will give the object to me, miss, I will see that it is restored to its place.
Thank you, Jeeves. Well, goodbye all. I'm off to find Harold, said Stiffy, and she withdrew, dancing on the tips of her toes. I shrugged a shoulder. Women, Jeeves.
Yes, sir.
What a sex.
Yes, sir.
Do you remember something I said to you about Stiffy on our previous visit to Totley Towers?
Not at the moment, no, sir.
It was on the occasion when she landed me with Police Constable Oates's helmet, just as my room was about to be searched by Pop Bassett and his minions. Dipping into the future, I pointed out that Stiffy, who is pure padded cell from the foundations up, was planning to marry the Rev. H.P. Pinker, himself as pronounced a goop as ever preached about the Hivites and the Hittites, and I speculated, if you recall, as to what their offspring, if any, would be like.
Ah, yes, sir. I recollect now.
Would they, I asked myself, inherit the combined loopiness of two such parents?
Yes, sir. You were particularly concerned, I recall, for the well-being of the nurses, governesses, private schoolmasters and public schoolmasters who would assume the charge of them.
Little knowing that they were coming up against something hotter than mustard, exactly. The thought still weighs heavy upon me. However, we haven't leisure to go into the subject now. You'd better take that ghastly object back where it belongs without delay.
Yes, sir. If it were done when 'twere done, then 'twere well it were done quickly, he said, making for the door.
And I thought, as I'd so often thought before, how neatly he put these things. It seemed to me that the time had now come to adopt the strategy which I had had in mind right at the beginning, viz., to make my getaway via the window. With Plank at large in the house, and likely at any moment to come winging back to where the drinks were, safety could be obtained only by making for some distant yew alley or rhododendron walk, and remaining ensconced there till he had blown over. I hastened to the window accordingly, and picture my chagrin and dismay on finding that Bartholomew, instead of continuing his stroll, had decided to take a siesta on the grass immediately below. I had actually got one leg over the sill before he was drawn to my attention. In another half jiffy I should have dropped on him as the gentle rain from heaven upon the spot beneath. I had no difficulty in recognizing the situation as what the French call an impasse, and as I stood pondering what to do for the best, footsteps sounded without, and feeling that 'twere well it were done quickly, I made for the sofa once more, lowering my previous record by perhaps a split second. I was surprised, as I lay nestling in my little nook, by the complete absence of dialogue that ensued. Hitherto, all my visitors had started chatting from the moment of their entry, and it struck me as odd that I should now be entertaining a couple of deaf mutes. Peeping cautiously out, however, I found that I had been mistaken in supposing that I had with me a brace of guests. It was Madeline alone who had blown in. She was heading for the piano, and something told me that it was her intention to sing old folk songs, a pastime to which, as I have indicated, she devoted not a little of her leisure. She was particularly given to indulgence in this nuisance when her soul had been undergoing an upheaval and required soothing, as of course it probably did at this juncture. My fears were realized. She sang two in rapid succession, and the thought that this sort of thing would be a permanent feature of our married life chilled me to the core. I've always been what you might call allergic to old folk songs, and the older they are, the more I dislike them. Fortunately, before she could start on a third, she was interrupted. Clumping footsteps sounded, the door handle turned, heavy breathing made itself heard, and a voice said, "Madeline." Spode's voice, husky with emotion.
"Madeline," he said, "I've been looking for you everywhere."
"Oh, Roderick, how's your eye?"
"Never mind my eye," said Spode. "I didn't come here to talk about eyes."
"They say a piece of beefsteak reduces the swelling."
"Nor about beefsteaks. Sir Watkin has told me the awful news about you and Worcester. Is it true you're going to marry him?"
"Yes, Roderick, it is true."
"But you can't love a half-baked, half-witted ass like Worcester,"
said Spode, and I thought the remark extremely offensive. "Pick your words more carefully, Spode," I might have said, rising and confronting him. However, for one reason and another, I didn't, but continued to nestle, and I heard Madeline sigh, unless it was the draught under the sofa.
"No, Roderick, I do not love him. He does not appeal to the essential me, but I feel it is my duty to make him happy."
"Cha!"
said Spode, or something that sounded like that.
"Why on earth do you want to go about making worms like Worcester happy?"
"He loves me, Roderick. You must have seen that dumb, worshipping look in his eyes as he gazes at me."
"I've something better to do than peer into Worcester's eyes, though I can well imagine they look dumb. We've got to have this thing out, Madeline."
"I don't understand you, Roderick."
"You will."
"Ouch!"
I think on the cue, "you will," he must have grabbed her by the wrist, for the word ouch had come through strong and clear, and this suspicion was confirmed when she said he was hurting her.
"I'm sorry, said Spode, "but I refuse to allow you to ruin your life. You can't marry this man Worcester. I'm the one you're going to marry."
I was with him heart and soul, as the expression is. Nothing would ever make me really fond of Roderick Spode, but I liked the way he was talking. A little more of this, I felt, and Bertram would be released from his honourable obligations. I wished he had thought of taking this firm line earlier.
"I've loved you since you were so high."
Not being able to see him, I couldn't ascertain how high that was, but I presumed he must have been holding his hand not far from the floor. Couple of feet, would you say? About that, I suppose. Madeline was plainly moved. I heard her gurgle.
"I know, Roderick, I know."
"You guessed my secret."
"Yes, Roderick, how sad life is."
Spode declined to string along with her in this view.
"Not a bit of it. Life's fine. At least it will be if you give this blighter Worcester the push and marry me."
"I've always been devoted to you, Roderick."
"Well then."
"Give me time to think."
"Carry on. Take all the time you need."
"I don't want to break Bertie's heart."
"Why not? Do him good."
"He loves me so dearly."
"Nonsense. I don't suppose he's ever loved anything in his life except a dry martini."
"How can you say that? Did he not come here because he found it impossible to stay away from me?"
"No, he jolly well didn't. Don't let him fool you on that point. He came here to pinch that black amber statuette of your father's."
"What?"
"That's what. In addition to being half-witted, he's a low thief."
"It can't be true."
"Of course it's true. His uncle wants the thing for his collection. I heard him plotting with his aunt on the telephone not half an hour ago. It's going to be pretty hard to get away with it, he was saying, but I'll do my best. I know how much Uncle Tom covets that statuette. He's always stealing things. The very first time I met him, in an antique shop in the Brompton Road, he as near as a toucher got away with your father's umbrella."
A monstrous charge, and one which I can readily refute. He and Pop Bassett and I were, I concede, in the antique shop in the Brompton Road to which he had alluded, but the umbrella sequence was purely one of those laughable misunderstandings. Pop Bassett had left the blunt instrument propped against a 17th century chair, and what caused me to take it up was the primeval instinct which makes a man without an umbrella, as I happened to be that morning, reach out unconsciously for the nearest one in sight, like a flower turning to the sun. The whole thing could have been explained in 2 words, but they hadn't let me say even one, and the slur had been allowed to rest on me.
"You shock me, Roderick," said Madeline.
"Yes, I thought it would make you sit up."
"If this is really so, if Bertie is really a thief—"
"Well?"
"Naturally, I will have nothing more to do with him. But I can't believe it."
"I'll go and fetch Sir Watkin," said Spode. "Perhaps you'll believe him."
For several minutes after he had clumped out, Madeline must have stood in a reverie, for I didn't hear a sound out of her. Then the door opened, and the next thing that came across was a cough, which I had no difficulty in recognizing. Chapter 23. It was that soft cough of Jeeves's, which always reminds me of a very old sheep clearing its throat on a distant mountain top. He coughed it at me, if you remember, on the occasion when I first swam into his ken wearing the alpine hat. It generally signifies disapproval, but I've known it to occur also when he's about to touch on a topic of a delicate nature. And when he spoke, I knew that that was what he was going to do now, for there was a sort of hushed note in his voice. "I wonder if I might have a moment of your time, miss." "Of course, Jeeves." "It is with reference to Mr. Wooster." "Oh, yes." "I must begin by saying that I chanced to be passing the door when Lord Sidcup was speaking to you, and inadvertently overheard his lordship's observations on the subject of Mr. Wooster. His lordship has a carrying voice, and I find myself in a somewhat equivocal position, torn between loyalty to my employer and a natural desire to do my duty as a citizen." "I don't understand you, Jeeves," said Madeline, which made two of us. He coughed again. "I am anxious not to take a liberty, miss, but if I may speak frankly—" "Please do." "Thank you, miss. His lordship's words seem to confirm a rumour which is circulating in the servants' hall that you are contemplating a matrimonial union with Mr. Wooster. Would it be indiscreet of me if I were to inquire if this is so?" "Yes, Jeeves, it is quite true." "If you will pardon me for saying so, I think you are making a mistake." "Well spoken, Jeeves. You are on the right lines," I was saying to myself, and I hoped he was going to rub it in. I waited anxiously for Madeline's reply, a little afraid that she would draw herself to her full height and dismiss him from her presence. But she didn't. She merely said again that she didn't understand him. "If I might explain, miss, I am loath to criticize my employer, but I feel that you should know that he is a kleptomaniac." "What?" "Yes, miss. I had hoped to be able to preserve his little secret, as I have always done hitherto, but he has now gone to lengths which I cannot countenance. In going through his effects this afternoon, I discovered this small black figure concealed beneath his underwear." I heard Madeline utter a sound like a dying soda-water siphon. "But that belongs to my father." "If I may say so, nothing belongs to anyone if Mr. Wooster takes a fancy to it." "Then Lord Sidcup was right?" Precisely, miss. "He said Mr. Wooster tried to steal my father's umbrella." "I heard him, and the charge was well founded. Umbrellas, jewellery, statuettes, they are all grist to Mr. Wooster's mill. I do not think he can help it. It is a form of mental illness. But whether a jury would take that view, I cannot say." Madeline went into the soda siphon routine once more. "You mean he might be sent to prison?" "It is a contingency that seems to me far from remote." Again I felt that he was on the right lines. His trained senses told him that if there's one thing that puts a gal off marrying a chap, it is the thought that the honeymoon may be spoiled at any moment by the arrival of inspectors at the love nest come to scoop him in for larceny. No young bride likes that sort of thing, and you can't blame her if she finds herself preferring to team up with someone like Spode, who, though a gorilla in fairly human shape, is known to keep strictly on the right side of the law. I could almost hear Madeline's thoughts turning in this direction, and I applauded Jeeves's sound grip on the psychology of the individual, as he calls it. Of course, I could see that all this wasn't going to make my position in the Bassett home any too good, but there are times when only the surgeon's knife will serve, and I had the sustaining thought that if ever I got out from behind this sofa, I could sneak off to where my car waited champing at the bit, and drive off Londonwards without stopping to say goodbye and thanks for a delightful visit. This would obviate all unpleasantness. Madeline continued shaken. "Oh dear," she said. "Yes, miss." "This has come as a great shock." "I can readily appreciate it, miss." "Have you known of this long?" "Ever since I entered Mr. Wooster's employment." Oh dear. Well, Thank you, Jeeves.
Not at all, miss.
I think Jeeves must have shimmered off after this, for silence fell, and nothing happened except that my nose began to tickle. I would have given 10 quid to have been able to sneeze, but this, of course, was outside the range of practical politics. I just crouched there, thinking of this and that, and after quite a while the door opened once more, this time to admit something in the nature of a mob scene. I could see 3 pairs of shoes, and deduced that they were those of Spode, Pop Bassett, and Plank. Spode, it will be recalled, had gone to fetch Pop, and Plank presumably had come along for the ride, hoping no doubt for something moist at journey's end. Spode was the first to speak, and his voice rang with the triumph that comes into the voices of suitors who have caught a dangerous rival bending.
Here we are, he said. I brought Sir Watkin to support my statement that Worcester is a low sneak thief who goes about snapping up everything that isn't nailed down. You agree, Sir Watkin?
Of course I do, Roderick. It's only a month or so ago that he and that aunt of his stole my cow creamer.
What's a cow creamer?
Asked Plank.
A silver cream jug, one of the gems of my collection.
They got away with it, did they?
They did.
Ah, said Plank.
Then in that case I think I'll have a whisky and soda.
Pop Bassett was warming to his theme. His voice rose above the hissing of Plank's siphon.
And it was only by the mercy of Providence that Worcester didn't make off with my umbrella that day in the Brompton Road. If that young man has one defect more marked than another, it is that he appears to be totally ignorant of the distinction between meum and tuum. He came up before me in my court once, I remember, charged with having stolen a policeman's helmet, and it is a lasting regret to me that I merely fined him £5.
Mistaken kindness,
said Spode.
So I've always felt, Roderick. A sharper lesson might have done him all the good in the world.
Never does to let these fellows off lightly, said Plank. I had a servant chap in Mozambique who used to help himself to my cigars, and I foolishly overlooked it because he assured me he'd got religion and everything would be quite all right from now on. And it wasn't a week later that he'd skipped out taking with him a box of Havanas and my false teeth, which he sold to one of the native chiefs in the neighbourhood. Cost me a case of trade gin and 2 strings of beads to get 'em back. Severity's the only thing. The iron hand, anything else is mistaken for weakness.
Madeline gave a sob. At least it sounded like a sob.
But, Daddy...
Well?
I don't think Bertie can help himself.
My dear child, it is precisely his habit of helping himself to anything he can lay his hands on that we are criticising.
I mean, he's a kleptomaniac.
Eh? Who told you that?
Jeeves.
That's odd. How did the subject come up?
He told me when he gave me this. He found it in Bertie's room. He was very worried about it.
There was a spot of silence, of a stunned nature, I imagine. Then Pop Bassett said, "Good heavens," and Spode said, "Good Lord," and Plank said, "Why, that's that little thingamy I sold you, Bassett, isn't it?" Madeline gave another sob, and my nose began to tickle again.
Well, this is astounding, said Pop. He found it in Worcester's room, you say?
Concealed beneath his underwear.
Pop Bassett uttered a sound like the wind going out of a dying duck.
How right you were, Roderick. You said his motive in coming here was to steal this, but how he got into the collection room I cannot understand.
These fellows have their methods. Seems to be a great demand for that thing, said Plank. There was a young slab of damnation with a criminal face round at my place only yesterday trying to sell it to me. Worcester! No, it wasn't Worcester. My fellow's name was Alpine Joe. Worcester would naturally adopt a pseudonym. I suppose he would. I never thought of that.
Well, after this, said Pop Bassett.
Yes, after this, said Spode. You're certainly not going to marry the man, Madeline. He's worse than Finknottle. Who's Finknottle? Asked Plank.
The one who eloped with Stoker, said Pop.
Who's Stoker? Asked Plank.
I don't think I've ever come across a fellow with a greater thirst for information.
The cook.
Oh, yes, I remember you telling me. Knew what he was doing, that chap. I'm strongly opposed to anyone marrying anybody, but if you're going to marry someone, you unquestionably save something from the wreck by marrying a woman who knows what to do with a joint of beef. There was a fellow I knew in the Federated Malay States who...
It would probably have been a diverting anecdote, but Spode didn't let him get on with it any further. Addressing Madeline, he said,
What you are going to do is marry me, and I don't want any argument. How about it, Madeline?
Yes, Roderick. I will be your wife.
Spode uttered a whoop, which made my nose tickle worse than ever.
That's the stuff. That's how I like to hear you talk. Come on out into the garden. I have much to say to you.
I imagined that at this juncture he must have folded her in his embrace and hustled her out, for I heard the door close. And as it did so, Pop Bassett uttered a whoop, somewhat similar in its intensity to the one that had proceeded from the Spode lips. He was patently bumps-a-daisy, and one could readily understand why. A father whose daughter, after nearly marrying Gussie Finknottle and then nearly marrying me, sees the light and hooks onto a prosperous member of the British aristocracy is entitled to rejoice. I didn't like Spode, and would have been glad at any time to see a Peruvian matron spike him in the leg with her dagger, but there was no denying that he was hot stuff matrimonially. "Lady Sidcup," said Pop, rolling the words round his tongue like vintage port.
Who's Lady Sidcup?
Asked Plank, anxious as always to keep abreast.
My daughter will shortly be. One of the oldest titles in England. That was Lord Sidcup, who has just left us.
I thought his name was Roderick.
His Christian name is Roderick.
Ah, said Plank. Now I've got it. Now I have the whole picture. Your daughter was to have married someone called Finknottle.
Yes.
Then she was to have married this chap Worcester, or Alpine Joe, as the case may be. Yes. But now she's going to marry Lord Sidcup. Yes. Clear as crystal, said Plank. I knew I should get it threshed out in time. Simply a matter of concentration and elimination. You approve this marriage? As far, he added, as one can approve of any marriage. I most certainly do. Then I think this calls for another whiskey and soda.
I will join you,
said Pop Bassett. It was at this point, unable to hold it back any longer, that I sneezed.
I knew there was something behind that sofa,
said Plank, rounding it, and subjecting me to the sort of look he had once given native chiefs who couldn't grasp the rules of rugby football.
Odd sounds came from that direction, good God. It's Alpine Joe.
It's Worcester.
Who's Worcester? Oh, you told me, didn't you? What steps do you propose to take?
I have rung for Butterfield.
Who's Butterfield?
My butler.
What do you want the butler for?
To tell him to bring oats.
Who's Oates?
Our local policeman. He's having a glass of whiskey in the kitchen.
Whiskey,
said Plank thoughtfully, and as if reminded of something, went to the side table. The door opened.
Oh, Butterfield. Will you tell Oates to come here?
Very good, Sir Watkin.
Bit out of condition, that chap,
said Plank, eyeing Butterfield's retreating back.
Wants a few games of rugger to put him in shape. What are you going to do about this Alpine Joe fellow? Are you going to charge him?
I certainly am. No doubt he assumed that I would shrink from causing a scandal, but he was wrong. I shall let the law take its course.
Quite right. Soak him to the utmost limit. You're a justice of the peace, aren't you?
I am, and intend to give him 28 days in the 2nd Division.
Or 60. Nice round number, 60. You couldn't make it 6 months, I suppose.
I fear not.
No, I imagine you have a regular tariff. Ah, well, 28 days is better than nothing.
Police Constable Oates, said Butterfield in the doorway. Chapter 24. I don't know why it is, but there's something about being hauled off to a police bin that makes you feel a bit silly. At least that's how it always affects me. I mean, there you are, you and the arm of the law, toddling along side by side, and you feel that in a sense he's your host, and you ought to show an interest and try to draw him out. But it's so difficult to hit on anything in the nature of an exchange of ideas, and conversation never really flows. I remember at my private school, the one I won a prize for scripture knowledge at, the Rev. Aubrey Upjohn, the top brass, used to take us one by one for an educational walk on Sunday afternoons, and I always found it hard to sparkle when my turn came to step out at his side. It was the same on this occasion when I accompanied Constable Oates to the village coop. It's no good my pretending the thing went with a swing, because it didn't. Probably, if I'd been one of the top-notchers, about to do a 10 years stretch for burglary or arson or what-not, it would have been different, but I was only one of the small fry who get 28 days in the 2nd Division, and I couldn't help thinking the officer was looking down on me. Not actually sneering, perhaps, but aloof in his manner, as if feeling I wasn't much for a cop to get his teeth into. And of course there was another thing. Speaking of my earlier visit to Totley Towers, I mentioned that when Pop Bassett immured me in my room, he stationed the local police force on the lawn below to see that I didn't nip out of the window. That local police force was this same Oates, and as it was raining like the dickens at the time, no doubt the episode had rankled. Only a very sunny constable can look with an indulgent eye on the fellow responsible for his getting the nastiest cold in the head of his career. At any rate, he showed himself now a man of few words, though good at locking people up in cells. There was only one at the Totley and the Wold Emporium, and I had it all to myself. A cosy little apartment, with a window, not barred but too small to get out of, a grill in the door, a plank bed, and that rather powerful aroma of drunks and disorderlies which you always find in these homes from home. Whether it was superior or inferior to the one they had given me at Bosher Street, I was unable to decide. Not much in it either way, it seemed to me. To say that when I turned in on the plank bed I fell into a dreamless sleep would be deceiving my public. I passed a somewhat restless night. I could have sworn, indeed, that I didn't drop off at all, but I suppose I must have done, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was coming through the window, and mine host was bringing me breakfast. I got outside it with an appetite unusual with me at such an early hour, and at the conclusion of the meal I fished out an old envelope, and did what I have sometimes done before, when the bludgeonings of fate were up and about to any extent, viz., make a list of credits and debits, as I believe Robinson Crusoe used to. The idea being to see whether I was ahead of or behind the game at the moment of going to press. The final score worked out as follows. Credit. Not at all a bad breakfast, that. Coffee quite good. I was surprised. Debit. Don't always be thinking of your stomach, you jailbird. Who's a jailbird? You're a jailbird. Well, yes, I suppose I am, if you care to put it that way. But I am innocent. My hands are clean. More than your face is. Not looking my best, what? You look like something the cat brought in. Bath will put that right, and you'll get one in prison. You really think it'll come to that? Well, you heard what Pop Bassett said. I wonder what it's like doing 28 days. Hitherto, I've always just come for the night. You'll hate it. It'll bore you stiff. I don't know so much. They give you a cake of soap and a hymn book, don't they? What's the good of a cake of soap and a hymn book? I'll be able to whack up some sort of indoor game with them. And don't forget that I've not got to marry Madeline Bassett. Let's hear what you have to say to that. And the debit account didn't utter. I had baffled it. Yes, I felt, as I hunted around in case there might be a crumb of bread which I had overlooked. That amply compensated me for the vicissitudes I was undergoing. And I'd been musing along these lines for a while, getting more and more reconciled to my lot, when a silvery voice spoke, making me jump like a startled grasshopper. I couldn't think where it was coming from at first, and speculated for a moment on the possibility of it being my guardian angel, though I had always thought of him, I don't know why, as being of the male sex. Then I saw something not unlike a human face at the grill, and a closer inspection told me that it was Stiffy. I hello-there'd cordially, and expressed some surprise at finding her on the premises. I wouldn't have thought Oates would have let you in. It isn't visitors' day, is it? She explained that the zealous officer had gone up to the house to see her Uncle Watkin, and that she had sneaked in when he had legged it. "Oh, Bertie," she said, "I wish I could slip you in a file." "What would I do with a file?" "Saw through the bars, of course, ass. There aren't any bars." "Oh, aren't there? That's a difficulty. We'll have to let it go, then. Have you had breakfast?" "Just finished." "Was it all right?" "Fairly toothsome." "I'm glad to hear that, because I'm weighed down with remorse." "You are? Why?" "Use the loaf. If I hadn't pinched that statuette thing, none of this would have happened." "Oh, I wouldn't worry." "But I do worry. Shall I tell Uncle Watkin that you're innocent because I was the guilty party? You ought to have your name cleared." I put the B on this suggestion with the greatest promptitude. "Certainly not. Don't dream of it." "But don't you want your name cleared?" "Not at the expense of you taking the rap." "Uncle Watkin wouldn't send me to Chokey." "I dare say not, but Stinker would learn all and would be shocked to the core." "Whew! I didn't think of that." "Think of it now. He wouldn't be able to help asking himself if it was a prudent move for a vicar to link his lot with yours. Doubts, that's what he'd have, and qualms. It isn't as if you were going to be a gangster's moll. The gangster would be all for you swiping everything in sight, and would encourage you with word and gesture, but it's different with Stinker. When he marries you, he'll want you to take charge of the parish funds. Apprise him of the facts, and you won't have an easy moment." "I see what you mean. Yes, you have a point there. Picture his jumpiness if he found you near the Sunday offertory bag. No, secrecy and silence is the only course." She sighed a bit, as if her conscience was troubling her, but she saw the force of my reasoning. "I suppose you're right, but I do hate the idea of you doing time." "There are compensations, such as, I am saved from the scaffold." "Oh, I see what you mean. You get out of marrying Madeline." "Exactly. And as I remember telling you once, I am implying nothing derogatory to Madeline when I say that the thought of being united to her in bonds of holy wedlock was one that gave your old friend shivers down the spine. The fact is in no way to her discredit. I should feel just the same about marrying many of the world's noblest women. There are certain females whom one respects, admires, reveres, but only from a distance, and it is to this group that Madeline belongs. And I was about to develop this theme, with possibly a reference to those folk songs, when a gruff voice interrupted our tete-a-tete, if you can call a thing a tete-a-tete, when the two of you are on opposite sides of an iron grill. It was Constable Oates, returned from his excursion. Stiffy's presence displeased him, and he spoke austerely.
What's all this?
He demanded. What's all what? Riposted Stiffy with spirit, and I remember thinking that she rather had him there.
It's against regulations to talk to the prisoner, miss.
Oates, said Stiffy, you're an ass. This was profoundly true, but it seemed to annoy the officer. He resented the charge and said so, and Stiffy said she didn't want any back chat from him. You road company rozzers make me sick. I was only trying to cheer him up. It seemed to me that the officer gave a bitter snort, and a moment later he revealed why he had done so.
It's me that wants cheering up,
he said morosely.
I've just seen Sir Watkin, and he says he isn't pressing the charge.
What? I cried. What? Yipped Stiffy.
That's what,
said the constable, and you could see that while there was sunshine above, there was none in his heart. I could sympathize with him, of course. Naturally, nothing makes a member of the force sicker than to have a criminal get away from him. He was in rather the same position as some crocodile on the Zambezi or some puma in Brazil would have been if it had earmarked plank for its lunch and seen him shin up a high tree.
Shackling the police, that's what I call it,
he said, and I think he spat on the floor. I couldn't see him, of course, but I was aware of a spit-like sound. Stiffy whooped, well pleased, and I whooped myself, if I remember correctly. For all the bold front I had been putting up, I had never in my heart really liked the idea of rotting for 28 days in a dungeon cell. Prison is all right for a night, but you don't want to go overdoing the thing. Then what are we waiting for? Said Stiffy. Get a move on, officer. Fling wide those gates. Oates flung them, not attempting to conceal his chagrin and disappointment, and I passed with Stiffy into the great world outside the prison walls. Goodbye, Oates, I said as we left, for one always likes to do the courteous thing. It's been nice meeting you. How are Mrs. Oates and the little ones? His only reply was a sound like a hippopotamus taking its foot out of the mud on a river bank, and I saw Stiffy frown as though his manner offended her. You know, she said as we reached the open spaces, we really ought to do something about Oates, something that would teach him that we're not put into this world for pleasure alone. I can't suggest what offhand, but if we put our heads together we could think of something. You ought to stay on, Bertie, and help me bring his ginger hairs in sorrow to the grave. I raised an eyebrow. As the guest of your Uncle Watkin, you could muck in with Harold. There's a spare room at that cottage place of his. Sorry, no. You won't stay on? I will not. I intend to put as many miles as possible in as short a time as possible between Totley and the Wold and myself, and it's no good your using that expression lily-livered poltroon, because I am adamant. She made what I believe is called a moo. It's done by pushing the lips out and drawing them in again. I thought it wouldn't be any use asking you. No spirit, that's your trouble. No enterprise. I'll have to get Harold to do it. And as I stood shuddering at the picture her words conjured up, she pushed off, exhibiting dudgeon, and I was still speculating as to what tureen of soup she was planning to land the sainted Pinker in, and hoping that he would have enough sense to stay out of it, when Jeeves drove up in the car, a welcome sight.
"Good morning, sir,"
he said.
"I trust you slept well."
"Fitfully, Jeeves. Those plank beds are not easy on the fleshy parts."
"So I would be disposed to imagine, sir. And your disturbed night has left you ruffled, I am sorry to see. You are far from soigné."
I could, I suppose, have said something about way down upon the Soigné River, but I didn't. My mind was occupied with deeper thoughts. I was in pensive mood. "You know, Jeeves," I said, "one lives and learns."
"Sir?"
"I mean, this episode has been a bit of an eye-opener to me. It has taught me a lesson. I see now what a mistake one makes in labelling someone as a ruddy-gored Elpus just because he normally behaves like a ruddy-gored Elpus. Look closely, and we find humanity in the unlikeliest places."
"A broad-minded view, sir."
Take this Sir W. Bassett. In my haste, I have always pencilled him in as a hellhound without a single redeeming quality. But what do I find? He has this softer side to him. Having got Bertram out on a limb, he does not, as one would have expected, proceed to saw it off, but tempers justice with mercy, declining to press the charge. It has touched me a good deal to discover that under that forbidding exterior there lies a heart of gold. Why are you looking like a stuffed frog, Jeeves? Don't you agree with me?
"Not altogether, sir, when you attribute Sir Watkin's leniency to sheer goodness of heart. There were inducements."
"I don't dig you, Jeeves."
"I made it a condition that you be set at liberty, sir.
My inability to dig him became intensified. He seemed to me to be talking through the back of his neck, the last thing you desire in a personal attendant. How do you mean condition? Condition of what?
Of my entering his employment, sir. I should mention that during my visit to Brinkley Court, Sir Watkin very kindly expressed appreciation of the manner in which I performed my duties, and made me an offer to leave your service and enter his. This offer, conditional upon your release, I have accepted.
The police station at Totley in the Wold is situated in the main street of that village, and from where we were standing I had a view of the establishments of a butcher, a baker, a grocer, and a publican licensed to sell tobacco, ales, and spirits. And as I heard these words, this butcher, this baker, this grocer, and this publican seemed to pirouette before my eyes as if afflicted with St. Vitus' dance. "You're leaving me?" I gasped, scarcely able to be my E. The corner of his mouth twitched. He seemed to be about to smile, but of course thought better of it.
Only temporarily, sir.
Again I was unable to dig him. Temporarily?
I think it more than possible that after perhaps a week or so, differences will arise between Sir Watkin and myself, compelling me to resign my position. In that event, if you are not already suited, sir, I shall be most happy to return to your employment.
I saw all. It was a ruse, and by no means the worst of them. His brain enlarged by constant helpings of fish, he had seen the way and found a formula acceptable to all parties. The mists cleared from before my eyes, and the butcher, the baker, the grocer, and the publican licensed to sell tobacco, ales, and spirits switched back again to what is called the status quo. A rush of emotion filled me. "Jeeves," I said, and if my voice shook, what of it? We Worcesters are but human. "You stand alone. Others abide our question, but you don't, as the fellow said. I wish there was something I could do to repay you." He coughed that sheep-like cough of his.
There does chance to be a favour it is within your power to bestow, sir.
"Name it, Jeeves. Ask of me what you will, even unto half my kingdom."
If you could see your way to abandoning your alpine hat, sir.
I ought to have seen it coming. That cough should have told me. But I hadn't, and the shock was severe. For an instant I don't mind admitting that I reeled. "You would go as far as that?" I said, chewing the lower lip.
It was merely a suggestion, sir.
I took the hat off and gazed at it. The morning sunlight played on it, and it had never looked so blue, its feather so pink. "I suppose you know you're breaking my heart."
I am sorry, sir.
I sighed. "But as I have said, the Worcesters can take it." "Very well, Jeeves. So be it." I gave him the hat. It made me feel like a father reluctantly throwing his child from the sledge to divert the attention of the pursuing wolf pack, as I believe happens all the time in Russia in the winter months. But what would you? "You propose to burn this alpine hat, Jeeves?"
No, sir. To present it to Mr. Butterfield. He thinks it will be of assistance to him in his courtship.
"His what?"
Mr. Butterfield is courting a widowed lady in the village, sir.
This surprised me. But surely he was 104 last birthday.
He is well stricken in years, yes, sir, but nevertheless...
There's life in the old dog yet?
Precisely, sir.
My heart melted. I ceased to think of self. It had just occurred to me that in the circumstances I would be unable to conclude my visit by tipping Butterfield. The hat would fill that gap. "All right, Jeeves. Give him the lid, and heaven speed his wooing. You might tell him that from me."
I will make a point of doing so. Thank you very much, sir.
Not at all, Jeeves.
That was Stiff Upper Lip Jeeves by P.G. Wodehouse. Read by Jonathan Cecil.